Welcome friends to another 40k video. Today we draw on the devastation of Baal by Guy Haley and join Dante as he makes a final stand with his blood angels against the Tyranid. So let's set. The Tyranids have brought down the void shields, exposing the angels' fortress, the Arx Angelicum, and its biomass to the hive minds. All the angels are brought into the keep for this last stand, and Dante gives a speech. He says, amongst other things, "We are all a death company now. The end will be a beautiful death for the Emperor, for Sanguinius, and the last stand of the angels starts. We smash aside the Tyranid. The end of the tunnel beckoned, bright and red as a bullet. As they ran, Dante shouted, 'From his blood are we born. From his essence are we made. From his passion comes our art. From his nobility comes beauty. From his might stems justice. From his thirst is born a righteous rage.'" For the first time in 12 centuries, Dante lets his control slip away, allowing the all-encompassing fury of Sanguinius to push aside his humanity. His worst fear was realized. To let go was pleasurable. Dante embraced the red thirst. Blood roared in his head, bringing pain. But with it came relief. No longer must he hold himself in check. He exulted in his freedom as his muscles swelled and distended. His heart hammered in his chest like an automatic weapon, fired to the point of malfunction. His angel's teeth extruded themselves from his gums. Rage against the dying of the light sounded out. They burst from the tunnel of the Elohim gate, the wrath of the emperor given form. The blood angels and their successors slammed into the brood of Tyranids, filling the landing fields, bowling over the smaller types and crushing them underfoot. Dante's feet hammered the skull of a Tyranid warrior, smashing it flat. Its lash whip curled up and snared his feet. Dante sphered it with the blow of his axe and thumped down onto the sand, then was offered. He moved like the desert wind, never still, never faltering, despite residual pain from his many wounds. Any semblance of squad cohesion or tactics went from the battle line as they surrendered themselves to the bloodthirst. They fought and died alone, a wave of howling berserkers who hacked and bludgeoned, who soon forgot the ranged weapons they bore, who broke the chainsaws they carried, who grappled with alien monstrosity with weaponless hands. For all their unstoppable fury, the signs were unmissable. One by one, the sanguinary guard were dragged down, plucked from the air by shrikes or clawed apart by carnifexes. Dante laughed in wild despair. Gathered together, all the sons of Sanguinius could accomplish was to slow the consumption of a single world. Thoughts of that clarity became rare. Dante let the raging monster in his soul out to smash down the foe. His perceptions lost their edge. Hallucinations stole upon him, supplanting reality. He sees visions, the sanguinor, moments from the heresy. One part was real. Light shone over the battlefield. The sanguinor hovered, 500 feet away, sword held upright, fingers pointed downward. Warriors in black battle plate appeared from the shimmering air, their armor covered in skulls and bones. Fire streamed from their eyes and mouths, and when their bolters fired, they shot strange communion of blue flame. The Legion of the Damned had come to aid the of Sanguinius in their hour of need. Dante blinked to this vision disappear. His warriors shouted and howled, regaining some of their humanity, and pressed on after the revenant deeper to the hordes of the Tyranid. The Tyranids fell back before their unearthly assailants. The trumpet sounded again, and Sanguinor pointed again with his blade at a spot on the battlefield. Dante began to climb, and looking down he saw no fallen brothers, no Tyranid corpses, but instead he walked over the collected remains of his victims, and he climbed for hours, seeing echoes from the past. He blinks in his back on Baal. 50 yards away was the largest hive tyrant Dante had ever seen, and he's likely to have seen. Upon backward, hinged legs stood, taller than a dreadnought. Red spore clouds pumped from the chimneys on its high back. Bonded to its fists were 4 matched bone swords, with heavy ends square and brutal as cleavers. He had heard of this thing, the galaxy's bane, the hive mind personified. Dante faced the Swarm Lord. In the monster's eyes glimmered an ancient and powerful intellect. As old as he was, Dante felt like a newborn babe compared to the intelligence staring at him through that unblinking gaze. He sensed that there were 2 beings looking at him, the monster and the being that controlled it. They were separate, yet one. A sense of crushing psychic might emanated from it, so great its grasp encompassed galaxies. There was sophistication there and terrifying intelligence, but all were outweighed by its bottomless, eternal hunger. For the moment, the man and the monster stared into one another's souls, and Dante pitied it. The hunger of the hive mind made the red thirst trivial by comparison. A rumble sounded in the monster's throat. Muscle fibers exposed by gaps in its chitinous armor contracted. That was all the warning Dante received. There was no threat display, no roar to intimidate. It simply hurled itself into the attack. The hive mind was nothing if not efficient. The Swarm Lord's weapons met the Axe Mortalis with a thunderous boom. Dante reeled back from the blow, letting out a brief blast from his jump pack to steady himself, dodging narrowly to the right to avoid a return strike from the Swarm Lord's two left-hand swords. He ignited his jump pack fully, making a short leap backwards as the swords from the right smashed into the desert where he had been standing. The energy field encasing the blade exploded the sand. As the beast slammed down its weapons, Dante snapped off a quick shot with his perdition pistol. His aim was honed by centuries of practice. The melter beam cut a roiling line through the air, connecting with the Swarm Lord's lower left elbow joint. An explosion of steam carried the smell of broiled meat out towards Dante, and the thing's arm went limp, and with a total lack of human emotion, it severed the crippled limb, and a sword was used to do that, and it moved in to re-engage. Dante struck and then flew away from the bone swords, causing scars on its carapace. He was on the brink of the Black Rage, but staved it off, and he needed to finish this with a decisive blow. He takes one eye from the creature with his axe, weaving through its swords and the spore clouds coming from the chimneys on its back. It shrieked a psychic assault. His mind suffered a lance of energy, as well as a psychic assault, and the lance of energy cut through into his leg. His face slammed into his helm, breaking his nose. It thundered at him, and he activated his jetpack, so he scraped across the rockcrete. He lost the pack, and so only now had the residual power in his armour. The Lord swung. Dante shattered the sabre. The remains of the blade hit his armoured belly and into his second heart, scraping his spine. Then the creature lifted the chapter master's body. It was over, and Dante spoke a prayer. The Mors Vortum, and the Swarm Lord brought its two remaining blades to cut Dante in two. Dante picked his pistol up and disengaged its safety features and gave his last words. My service is done. I give thanks. My life is finished. I give thanks. Blood returns to blood. Another will take up my burden in my stead. I give thanks. He fired the perdition pistol at point-blank range into the Swarm Lord's face. Its flesh liquefied and boiled off as superheated steam. Its first bone sword bounced from Dante's armour, ripping long scratches into its decoration. Bloodstones fell from their mounts. Still Dante held his aim true. The pistol's power pack grew so hot with thermal feedback, it blistered his skin through his ceramite. Still he did not relent. The fusion beam bobbed through the creature's organic armour. Thermic biogels bled from the cavities in the chitin, but they could not stay the perdition pistol's beam. The weapon glowed with white heat. The Swarm Lord reared backwards. Its cries became gurgles as its tongue cooked in its head. Desperate to be free of Dante, it severed its own wrist with a clumsy strike. Dante blacked out for a moment from the pain of the bone shard jarring in his organs as he hit the floor. When he came to, he was lying on the ground. The Swarm Lord slumped to its knees alongside him. This was how 1,500 years of service ended. He had given a score of lifetimes to the Imperium, and he begrudged it not one day. He smiled. He had done his best. By his efforts had the tide of evil been kept from mankind's door a few extra years. That had been his ambition, and he had fulfilled it 100,000 times. Darkness rushed at him. He welcomed it with open arms. And with that sad moment, friends, we end. No, I'm only kidding. Dante's mind rolls on. He sees his father, the great angel Sanguinius, who calls Dante his greatest son. You have been a light in the dark times, Sanguinius tells Dante. I would give you any reward. I would take you to my side. I would free you from strife. I would release you from pain. And Dante once Lewis wants this, but Sanguinius says that Dante can't rest yet, and Dante is returned to life, screaming for the mercy of death, and he wakes and sees the face of a sanguinary priest over him. He meets the Primaris Marines and others under Rabute. The Primarch returned, the avenging son. Upon seeing the Lord of Ultramar, he kneels, but Gilliman says no. He's one of the few to speak to him on equal terms. Dante says he has failed. Rabute says he stopped them, and his Indomitus crusade will scour away the final tenants. At that, Dante wept freely I'm sorry, he said. I almost lost everything. Please forgive me. There's nothing to forgive, Vibuti tells him, but Dante did not hear. Overwhelmed by his hurts and the luminous presence of a living Primarch, he collapsed to the ground and found a brief respite of rest in that darkness till he returned. And that, friends, is where I'll end today's video and the great fight of the Blood Angels, led by the mighty chapter master Dante against the Tyranid hive swarm. Got something to say? Open your mouth and drop a comment down below. Let's have a chat.